Hello and welcome to a lovely new episode of the Pit Pony podcast with an old friend of ours, Paula Smith. And Paula's is an amazing story. Paula is a storyteller. She really is. She is a barrel of laughs. First time I met Paula, not so much, because I was privileged to meet her at the start of her journey outside of the classroom after 30 years serving young people in her area. She rose to the ranks of head teacher, executive head teacher. And if ever there was a story of somebody hemorrhaging out of leadership, hemorrhaging out of a profession she loved, it's Paula. But she has thrived on the other side. There is no two ways about it. So Paula, welcome. Welcome to our podcast today. Would you like to tell? It's no problem. Would you like to tell us what it is you're doing?
So, I'm Paula Smith and I am a transformational coach nowadays in my new life.
Brilliant. Yes. In the autumnal chapter of our years. Okay. Paula, basically, this is over to you. This is start where you feel most comfortable. Tell us in as much detail as you feel able to share with us. And we are just going to sit and listen. Can I just say, it is a wet and windy Saturday afternoon in Warrington. So when that happens and you live in 1976, where Wi-Fi is concerned, please forgive me if there's any glitches or issues with sound, but your story is too important for us not to hear. So Paula, over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, well, where do I begin? I suppose I would go back to the very beginning. And coming into this world, born into a kind of a staunch Catholic family, youngest daughter of three girls, and both my parents were teachers. And they were first generation graduates in their family. Nobody had ever gone to further education in their family. They came from working backgrounds. And because of that, they were very aspirational for us, for all three of us girls. And two things, I think, dominated our house growing up. Education was one of them. It was a way out of the poverty trap. And faith, church, God, religion, that was probably the central thing of our lives growing up. I always remember my mum telling the story of her first ever teaching practice. And I mean, we think we've got big class sizes now. She had a class of 50 boys from the wrong side of town in Liverpool. And she ended up being the confirmation sponsor for all 50 of them. And she always used to tell that story with pride. So I guess going right back then, the subconscious seeds were sown in the early days, the importance of a good education and the importance of contribution. We're here to serve. We're here to put others first. And that came through our faith upbringing. When I was at school, I was quite an ordinary kid, really. I didn't particularly excel at anything. I always used to say I was jack of all trades and master of none. And if I'm honest, I did the bare minimum to get by. School was just a big social experiment for me. I just used to love the social aspect of it. And when you read my reports, it says all over them, Paula would do really, really well if she just stopped talking. So I was that kid, the ones that we've all had in our classroom that was like, just stop talking and listen to what you've got to do. So school was fun. There was a bit of bullying. I was a podgy kid, and I wasn't the most popular, I thought, because of that. And so I got ribbed a bit. And and this is a pet hate of mine. When teachers sometimes say, right, you're the captain and you're the captain, and you pick your teams. I was always that kid that was last to be picked because I wasn't sporty. I wasn't.
Paula,
yeah.
Can I interject, right? And I'm going to even name and shame my good friend, Joanne Addison, who lives in Newton Willows, right? Joanne Addison was the captain. Okay. So there is me and another child left being picked last. And Joanne Addison turns to the captain of the other team and says, "You can have them both." So I did.
So you know where I'm coming from, right?
So I didn't even not get picked. They didn't even want me on the team, and they did 2 for the price of one. Joanne went, "It's all right, you can have them both." Yeah, been there, my love, been there.
Yeah. And I guess so as a result of that, I learned this is, and a lot of comedians say this, they learn to use humour to get out ahead of the game. Because I guess if I could get people laughing with me rather than at me, that felt better. That felt a lot better. And I guess that's where it was, the humour side of things is a bit of a survival instinct, I guess. Yeah, and I still use it to this day, not consciously, but it comes out, and I enjoy it when people laugh at the things that I say. It's nice feedback, isn't it? It makes you feel good. Yeah, so there I was, not being picked for teams, but I had a good set of friends, and as I say, I really enjoyed school. And I also remember from an early age, I was really fascinated about how things work. Things, people, and there was nothing in my house that was sacred. I was like, Yoda in the second Star Wars film, when he meets Luke Skywalker and he's going through everything and he's picking it out and he's throwing bits and pieces around. That's what I did. I used to take everything apart when I was little. Drove my parents insane. But I guess I've just always been curious. I really I like to know how things work. I'm fascinated by learning and education. I also really liked singing when I was younger, and I was good at it. And that was something that also got me approval. And it got me the recognition that I kind of craved, that I wasn't getting from not being picked and all of that. So those are the 2 things that kind of made me tick, really, understanding how things work. And I still can't resist a good karaoke these days, I still enjoy getting that attention from something that I'm good at. It's in all of us, isn't it? We want to be recognised. We want to be seen. We want to be valued for what we're good at. And sadly, I don't think it's the teaching profession these days is something that allows that to happen very easily. Anyway, I was fascinated by planes, and that's all I wanted to do. I never wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a pilot. That was it. So I took all my options, O levels, A levels, with a view to that's what I was going to be. But thank God the universe had a different plan for me. So I failed my physics A level gloriously. But I didn't have a plan B. That was it. So I didn't get on to doing the course that I planned to do. And so I had an enforced, if you like, gap year. And my parents always said, you're never having a gap year. If you leave education, you'll never go back. That's interesting, isn't it? Well, I've left and I'm never going back. It took me 30 years. But I'm not. I can still hear their voices saying, "Oh, if you leave, you'll never go back." Anyway, so I moved out of home when I was 18, lived with a friend from school who also hadn't got the grades that she needed to go on to further education. So the 2 of us had a great year, actually, just we had money for the first time. We both had jobs, and we went and had a great life for a year and a half. But something was missing. And there was this little voice, I guess, in the back of my mind saying, what about teaching? And when I thought about it, when I was little, I used to line all my teddies up in the morning and play teaching with them. I used to make them listen to what I had to say, and I cut up bits of paper for them to write on and that kind of thing. So I was role playing as a teacher from a very early age. And I was creative. I loved to make things. I loved to draw things and paint things. And I started to think of teaching. Well, that's a way where I could be quite creative. And it kind of grew from there. And then, I looked at my family. Both parents were teachers. My dad was a head teacher. All my aunties on my dad's side were teachers. So kind of the writing was on the wall a little bit, and I started to think about it seriously. I thought, but nobody will take me. That typical kind of, self-doubt was creeping in at that point. But anyway, I got accepted onto a course, and it wasn't actually until I came home and told my parents. I didn't tell them I was doing it. It turned out I'd applied to the same college that my dad did his teacher training at. I hadn't known that, but when I said I got a place at St Mary's in Twickenham, he was like, "Oh, that's where I went." Now, there's a story as well. My dad was a head teacher, and he was a very, very good head teacher. He had a hugely loyal staff. His kids loved him. There were over 1,000 people at his funeral, actually, when he died, most of which were ex-staff and ex-pupils. But the year I started teacher training to go to the same college as him, he had taken early retirement that summer because he was losing his battle, basically, against a 5-year battle that he had against bowel cancer, which we now know is entirely preventable, and it's entirely stress-related disease. And he did sort of say to me, "Nah, kid, you don't want to be a teacher. Do something else." He tried to put me off. But it was his leaving do, and he did this speech, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. My dad was a really great public speaker. I went up to him afterwards and I said, "If I'm ever half as good a teacher as you, then I'll be proud." He died 5 months later. He didn't see me graduate, which is one of my biggest sorrows in life, actually. And he died never having got to play the keyboard that he got given as his retirement present. He used to love playing the piano, and he got given this really fancy keyboard. He never got to play it because he was so ill. 5 months after he retired, he was in the ground. Such is the toll that the profession can take on you.
Yeah, and if I may, the same happened to my dad, and I know our lives are very, very similar, and I know they are, Paula. The same happened with my dad. He retired from the prison service, and his diagnosis for dementia came very, very quickly. So I think there's just a piece here before we even get into your story about one of the false gods that keeps us in the profession that I talk about at great length, which is this concept of retiring and in your retirement and your pension. And many of us have that mentality. My parents did it to a greater extent. Pay off your mortgage when I retire. They spend their lives preparing for the winter of their lives, and they retire and they save. And I made it my mission to completely give the opposite advice to my children and take that advice myself. You live for now. You are sensible. You make sure you're going to be okay financially, but you do not plan everything and do everything for a fixed point in life. They used to do it for 2 weeks holiday a year. My mum worked every single Saturday morning in a Bookies on the high street in Newton Willows. She worked every single Saturday so that she could take us on holiday for 2 weeks. On reflection, and me and my sister have talked about this at great length, guess what we would have preferred? Her to be with us every Saturday morning. So I think I'd like to bring Sarah in on this point. You've started with us already for food for thought, Paula. It is the mindset of living for now. If not now, then when? Sarah, you've got thoughts about this. I know you have. I know you and I have talked about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. A completely side note, but related, that Paula and I were talking off screen about my little adventure of a lifetime that's just happened, and the conversation that sits around my mum, who's a sprightly goddess like 75, who my brother and I have said, spend it. Like, just do these things. But I think And she is, to be fair. So she's the very model of what retirement looks like. She retired at 50 and she's just lived her life. I know too many people, sadly, who are not with us, who didn't make it to retirement. I had a much loved colleague who literally did not turn up to work one Monday morning because he'd had a catastrophic stroke on the Sunday night. And the sadness of it, all of the sadnesses, but one of the sadnesses was that he had made a decision to do one more year to help get his daughter through uni. So he was in that one more year. And I think, excuse me, I think the pension is a false god. I think living in the future is nonsense. There's too much happened to too many people that all three of us on this screen know and have experienced, that you can't. Yes, you can plan for your future, but you don't delay what's now for that future point. And I think that that's two very different things. Yeah, no, the pension is not. It's not the point. It's not the point.
Absolutely. You don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard, do you? You can't take it with you. And my dad was 59. I'll talk later about kind of one of the big turning points for me that made me realise life's too short. As we're talking about it, I'll talk about it now. My sister was 56 when she died. She was also high achieving. There was a thread that ran through our family, and I'm quite sure it's to do with getting out of the poverty trap. You work hard. It's the classic pit pony, isn't it? Work, work. And with the faith background as well, serve. Serve, work and serve. It's selfish to think of yourself. It's wrong. You mustn't put yourself first. You must put others first all the time. My sister was a barrister. She was senior prosecutor for the CPS in Brighton. And she had that same ethic. She worked. Whatever she did, she threw her life and soul into. It was the year of their 30th wedding anniversary, her and her husband. And they didn't have kids, and they never took holidays. So they decided to have a big holiday, a big blowout holiday. They'd planned this 8-week trip to Australia. And we saw them off at the airport, and it was all wonderful. And my sister, exactly what you said, Sarah, she was going to give it one more year before getting out. She'd been gone a week, and we got the phone call from Australia from her husband to say, your sister's dead. She was snorkeling off the Great Barrier Reef, had a massive heart attack in the water, didn't get back on the boat. And going to meet him at Heathrow 2 weeks later was the most chilling thing ever, because I was meant to be seeing him and my sister walk back through arrivals, but he came on his own. So absolutely, excuse the French, but F the pension.
Absolutely. And life is short has become a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. Cliches are true. That's the reality. So I think live for it, and don't live in the the worst might happen. But it's finding that balance, isn't it, between living for now and making sure that you're going to be all right in the future.
So, Paula, that was a really, really great foundation and context. And we have this faith, we have this serving. We also, I suspect, have parents. I talk about this at great length as well. We have parents who are post-war generation. They were the boomers. And actually, if you go just a little step back, they were raised by Victorian parents. So they were raised by Victorian parents. They were post-war generation. So there was a scarcity mindset. There was very much emotional repression. It is literally 2 generations behind us, and it really is a different world. So you're absolutely correct when it comes to the concept of the pit pony. We serve, we are, selfish is bad, whereas the reframe in our house is be self-full. You put yourself first at all costs, because if your tank is empty, you cannot serve. So we had all of these mixed messages of children of the late 60s and the 70s. And that is the generation of teachers who we find on our podcast. So going back 30 years, I'm assuming you entered the profession in the 90s, late 80s, 90s.
93.
Okay. 93. So you're within spitting distance of Sarah and I. So you enter in, you are first foot forward, you're leading from the front foot, you are going into teaching, you're still grieving. But tell us about the heyday, the halcyon years of Paula Smith as a teacher.
I mean, I was really blessed. Most of my schools actually, but my first school particularly was just the most incredible place to be. The staff were amazing. The kids were amazing. I was supported by an incredible head who just saw the value of investing in people. She was wise. She ruled with a rod of iron. People were, you quaked in your boots when she came down the corridor, but she was the most benevolent leader. I learned so much from her about leadership, actually. We're still very, very good friends to this day. She's just had her 90th birthday, which I was very privileged to be one of the select few to attend. So it was great. There was a young staff, there was a mixture of young and old and wisdom and a real sense of camaraderie. Back in those days, your mate teacher would come in and help you do your marking. You'd be done by 4 o'clock and down the pub. It was really halcyon days. Did you ever watch Teachers? That's what it was like. It was just fun. It was great fun. Before the years of league tables and Ofsted, when it all just went horrendous. And so it was great. And it was a 2-form entry school that I was in, so I had the privilege of being able to plan with somebody else, and that was the only 2-form entry school I was in, actually. After that, forever after, I was 1-form entry, which is a whole different ball game. So it was great. I met friends at the Teachers Centre who had graduated at the same time. I had a great friendship group, great life. I never sought promotion found me. I wasn't ambitious. I wasn't, I was just happy living in the moment. But I remember people thinking that I'd got a promotion when I went from teaching year 3 to year 6. The perception is that you're a year 6 teacher, top of the school, you're promoted. But actually, I remember going from year 6 to year 1 one Christmas. Like when I became a deputy, I left the year 6 classroom in December, and I started my new school, my new role as a deputy in the year 1 classroom. I'd never taught Key Stage 1 in my life. That was promotion. I used to say it's like going from year 6 to year 1 is like going from brain surgery. It's going from beauty therapy to brain surgery without any extra training. What do you mean they can't read? What do you mean I've got to teach them to read? So that was promotion. But I became a deputy at 32. Again, worked for an incredible head. We had a really, really good partnership. I was really good. And then I was asked by the school that I'd left to go back and be a head teacher at the school. They asked me to apply to be the head at the school. And at the same time, the head that was working for was leaving. So the governors of that school asked if I would step in and just see them over until they appointed a head teacher. And by the way, did I want to apply? Which I didn't at that school, but the other school, yes. So I went along, had my interview, and got given the job. And I was 35. At the time, I was the youngest head teacher in the Diocese of Westminster. It's much more common now to have younger heads. But at that time, I was the youngest ever head that they'd had in Westminster Diocese. 35, I had a 2-year-old at home. And I mean, nothing that you can do prepares you for being a head teacher. Nothing. There's no similarity. When you enter the profession to be a teacher, you want to be in the classroom teaching children. As a head teacher, you're a business manager, you're a budget holder, you're an employee, you're an employer. Never had I been trained for any of those. There was the NPQH, yeah? And yeah, they built it in where you had to have the NPQH to be a head teacher. But I remember sitting in that seat on the first day, literally swinging around in my seat going, what does a head teacher do all day? What do you mean I can go for a wee when I actually want to go for a wee? That's odd. That's a strange concept. And it was great. I absolutely loved it. But I always had this sort of imposter syndrome feeling that any minute now they're going to work out that I don't know what I'm doing. Because why would you? You deposited into this role with no support, really. I mean, I had a mentor as such from another school, but I think we had coffee twice and a bit of a chat. You know, there was no real kind of structured support to help you succeed. And it's just sort of sink or swim, really. Well, unfortunately, I did swim for the first 7 years, I'd say. I swam quite well. We had a couple of Ofsteds, which were really great. One of my really, really fond memories is after our first Ofsted. After Ofsted had left the building, I walked into the staff room and they're all there waiting. And nothing was said. I just walked through the door and everybody stood up and gave me a round of applause. That, to me, that's feedback, right? That's you doing something right. It didn't matter what the Ofsted judgment was. It was a good judgment, but that didn't matter. What mattered to me was my staff felt supported enough to want to support me, if you see what I mean. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. So I loved most of it. I really loved doing assemblies. I loved standing up in front of parents. I loved the leadership aspect of it. I loved being able to mold people and grow people and see their strengths and being able to then help people become better versions of themselves and better teachers. That for me was what it was about, because if you're happy, if you're doing your job well, then those kids are going to get the best out of you and they're going to get the best deal. If you're not happy, then let's talk about it. Let's find out what we can do to elevate you. And that was my start.
And don't you think, Paula, that obviously because we're talking about the years in which we started teaching and the decades and the era, everybody talks about the time of about 2015 onwards, 2014, that being a period of change. We know life was like teaching in teachers. And there was also, I don't know if you remember this, I think it was, his name's Jimmy McGovern. Jimmy McGovern did Hearts and Minds with Christopher Eccleston. So it was of an era when we went into teaching. And I think there was a turning point that came, and that's why us lifers didn't stick for life. We know it was the Michael Gove era, particularly was for secondary schools in terms of the curriculum, the pressures, the shift in Ofsted from being supportive and HMI inspections to actually being weaponized in many respects by head teachers as a stick. You know, when we talked about Mum did everything for those 2 weeks that we went to Torquay, well, that's what happened in schools. head teachers did everything throughout the year in the event of a 3-day visit from Ofsted. We need to be doing this for when Ofsted comes. We need to be doing this for when. Jesus Christ, there's 363 days left before the buggers come into the school. Can we just not be? And everything was done in that way. So there's a line in the sand when things start to change. And if memory serves me right with your story, you don't have a protracted period of change. What happens now? I could be wrong, but what happens to you is not dissimilar to Sarah's story. It is out of the blue, it is swift, it is sharp, it comes from nowhere, and it's game over really quickly. So if I may, and I will bring Sarah in at this point to share aspects of how she will be able to resonate to it. Tell us where things headed to with you, Paula. How did things get to crisis?
Yeah, I mean, so I say I love the job, and I did love the job, but there are bits of it that I really didn't love. For example, I didn't love having to clear the playground of snow every day one winter, the year that we didn't have a caretaker. Nobody else to do that job. That's what you do. I didn't enjoy the 3-day pool carers course that had to go on because we had a pool at the school, and then the 78-page safe operating procedure that I had to write on the back of that. I didn't enjoy that kind of stuff. I didn't enjoy being held around the throat up against the wall by an angry parent who wanted my blood because I'd excluded her child for giving another child a black eye. I didn't enjoy having to guide the school community through the weeks after the death of one of the pupils at the school, and then 6 months later, the suicide of another. I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy leading the school through not one, but 2 infant deaths of members of staff. So, for example, I remember this very clearly. One of our TAs had a stillborn baby, and her daughter was in the year 6 class, and I got the phone call and had to go and get the child from class because her auntie was going to come and collect her. And I walked into the classroom and I asked for this child, and all the kids started cheering, going, "Oh, your mum's had the baby, your mum's had the baby." And I had to take her down and hand her over to her auntie, knowing what I knew. I remember 2 days later speaking to that mum, and all the empathy and the pain, the visceral pain, and the space that you hold in a conversation like that for someone. Coming off the phone, putting the phone down, and within seconds going into a business meeting with the planners for the school who were coming to do an extension, with tears pouring down my face. And that was the thing about the job. You had to be on point all the time, whether you were wiping up somebody's tears or whether you're talking to social services or, doing something massive. And those are the highs and lows of leading the school community. And they're not the things that Ofsted measure. And they can take their toll over time if you're not careful. And it's true when they say headship is a very isolated role. Where do you go with all of that? That's going in your body. That's you're living that. Where do you go to? You're the one there for people to come to. But where do you go with all of that? So, yeah, it started to take its toll over time. And then you talked about how things changed, and there was a big change. We'd had 2 successful Ofsteds. Ofsted were coming again. I was very lucky to have 3 Ofsteds in that window of my life. And things had changed. The framework had changed, and the way that they measure results had changed. The contextual value added thing had been removed. So we'd gone in a year from a school that was being compared with like schools with similar catchments and similar backgrounds to being compared with all schools. And so what that looked like was our results had dropped, but they hadn't. It was just a change in the metric. So that got attention, and the wrong kind of attention. The local authority were quite aggressive in terms of, oh, we can't have one of our flagship schools now looking like it's not doing very well. And it's a point to make here, because we had this change of framework, and we were one of the first schools to be judged under the new framework. And we'd gone along, all the heads of the borough had been called to the teacher centre to have a one-day training on the new framework. And one of the things we had to do was we were given all the data and reports from a made-up school, and we had to use the framework to come up with a judgment about this school. 70-odd heads in the room. The judgments that they came up with ranged from requiring improvement to outstanding. So that just went to prove the kind of the arbitrary nature of the judgments that are made about schools. It all depends on the team. And I will say this again and again and again. It does depend on the team that you get. And it was a new framework. They had a lot to prove. So we had an Ofsted, and we came out as requiring improvement. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated, because you feel like it's your fault. It was awful, really awful. I was embarrassed. I felt shame. I felt guilt. All these people were relying on me, and I'd let them down. That's how I felt. So when you go RI, all eyes are on you, and HMI were back in within 8 weeks, and you have to have this. At the time, you had to write an Ofsted action plan to get yourself back to good. Our HMI came in eight weeks later, and I think we'd even had a half term, so 7 school weeks, really, 35 days, 35 working days. And they decided that we hadn't made satisfactory progress against the Ofsted action plan. So that had to be written in a letter and a report and published on the school website and on the Ofsted website. And I was numb, really, by this time. So I listened to what was being said, but I don't think I was really processing it. I think I was probably quite ill by this time. And about a week later, the report landed in my inbox. Now, hearing it spoken is one thing, but when I read through it, and it was 1 page of A4, and it didn't say anything much really, other than satisfactory progress hasn't been made. No fingers were pointed or anything. But reading it in black and white was the moment that I think I snapped, really. Something broke in me. I call it my almost Ruth Perry moment. And when I say almost, I didn't know what to do with myself. I just knew that I had to leave the building. That's all I could think of. I have to leave this building. And I used to sign kids' books and give them stickers if they brought their work to me. And my secretary came down to my office with this bunch of kids in tow for me to look at their work and give them stickers. And she breezed in. She went, "Mrs. Smith, we've got not a good time." And she literally spun on her heels and she read the room and she marched these kids back up the corridor. And I sat there for about 5 minutes just staring at this screen, not knowing what to do. And all I could think of was just to get out. So I switched my computer off, picked up my keys and my bag, and there was a fire exit in my office that led onto the car park. And I went out the fire exit, went out the back door, got in my car and drove. instinct drove home, and I was just literally operating on instinct at this point. I wasn't thinking. And I was on the phone, on speakerphone to my husband, and I was crying and not able to speak. And he was clearly, obviously worried about me, shouting, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I just remember having this thought that all I've got to do now is tweak my wheel. I'm on the M25, I'm doing 70 miles an hour. All I've got to do is tweak my wheel. I'm in the central reservation, and it's all over. Thank God I didn't. And it was the picture of my, at the time, 3-year-old and 7-year-old in my head that stopped me from doing that. But that was it. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I didn't know that I wasn't ever going to go back. And I never went back. I've never crossed the door of that school threshold ever again. They had a 40th anniversary about 10 years ago, and all the ex-head teachers were invited. I wasn't invited. Yeah.
Okay, Paula, Sarah, thoughts?
Completely mirrors my experience. Can we go to Ofsted first? In fact, actually, no. Can we go to becoming a head teacher first? Because you mentioned NPQH. I did mine in 2007, 8, 9. And it was good, but I decided after I got my NPQH I was never going to be a head because I did not feel adequately prepared by that qualification or anything else that sat around it. So I made a decision that I was only ever going to top out below a headship. I was not doing it. And then that was further amplified for me by seeing a really good head be put through the Ofsted ringer for exactly the same as you've talked about. We were a school that was challenging in terms of social factors, high levels of deprivation, equivalent to Tower Hamlets, that sort of thing. When contextual value added as a measure that allowed you to be compared with like schools, we were okay. We were fine. We were working really hard for our kids, but the minute that was pulled, suddenly you go from being a school in the middle to a school in the bottom 5% of the country nationally. But nothing has changed on the ground. It's the metric that has changed. And so you see good people who really are great, effective leaders because of some arbitrary change of wording just destroyed in front of your eyes. And I'm thinking of this particular person. Fortunately, they had so much integrity that they didn't cascade that down to their staff. Right? There was a buffer, which was the door to the senior team corridor. That was the buffer. It didn't get rolled out there. But the change of language, the change from satisfactory used to be okay. And then satisfactory actually ended up being the category that was requires improvement. Well, and not being funny, requires improvement. No school, no matter how outstanding they are, you're not telling me that there's something that can't be improved. Requires improvement is a nonsense. So Ofsted have a huge amount to answer for, and so did DFE, because DFE support those frameworks and they sign them off, and it's all, to use a word that I've used this week, it's all bobbins. It's all nonsense. So I completely get that. And for me, the thing that resonated most for me is who is the person. Where do you get supervision? As a designated safeguarding lead, you get supervision to help you with all of those things that you see here and all the rest of it. As a head teacher, where do you get supervision? Who supports you? And is it any wonder that people are having those moments where in the blink of an eye you could make a decision to end your life? It's unacceptable. But it's
And if I
very,
may,
very
Sarah,
personal for me because it resonates completely with me.
I think what I took away from Paula's story was she'd opened with the importance of life. She'd lost a sister at 56. She'd lost her dad at 59, who'd only enjoyed 1 year of his retirement. We started talking about how precious life is. So she got that. She knew that. And yet, despite being the mum of 2 really, really young kids, what that job did to her put her in such pain, such absolute acute pain, that you thought of unaliving yourself as a result of a job that you absolutely loved. And you're right to have mentioned her name. You are right to have invoked something that we talk about a lot in Life After Teaching, which is the concept of the tree. But I just want to thank you first and foremost for sharing that, because I can still see, I know how much work you've done on yourself, Paula. I know what your journey has been like in terms of transforming your life. But to see you visibly upset as you shared that story, I don't know how many times you've spoken about it, but it's clear that that pain is still very much there for you. So I want to personally say thank you for articulating that. And Sarah's absolutely right. She can resonate with that completely because, again, slightly different set of circumstances, completely the same feelings. Really great quality teachers who entered the profession in the 90s. Integrity, strength, resilience are reduced to that because we've changed goalposts. That was it. Changed goalposts. Paula, if I can I ask you to take us back to pulling your car into the driveway, because you did make it home that day. If it's okay to take a breath, What happened when you got home? What did you do?
I lay down. I lay down on the floor and just let the tears come. My husband came home and there wasn't much he could do really. And I suppose it probably took about a week before I could kind of really speak about it. Now, I've always been very much a learner, and I've always been proactive in mental health. I understand the importance of good mental health. And I had looked after myself. I had had those conversations. I had had counselling. I had, I wasn't, I was brave enough to take that step and speak to somebody. So I knew that's what I had to do. And I was re-put on high levels of antidepressant medication, anxiety, signed off sick. And it went on like that, sort of month after month. I was signed off a month at a time. And then it's hard to remember how many months, maybe 4, before there was talk of a settlement agreement. In my head, as fractured as it was at that time, I still thought I'd be going back. I just thought it was a matter of time. I just needed to get well and I was going to go back. When the talk of a settlement agreement was put to me, I thought, oh, okay, I need to get hold of the union rep, which I did. And then there was this period of time where it was all just letters and negotiations and meetings. And in fact, I had the head that I was a deputy for was my advocate. She was instrumental in kind of holding my hand through the whole of this process. And every meeting I went to, she came with me along with the union rep. But that period of time is just a bit of a blur to me. And I'd say it was probably halfway through the autumn term. So I'd had the summer as well to kind of spend time trying to get well. We had a kind of a final meeting, and I remember coming out of that and this friend of mine saying to me, well, they really don't want you back, do they? And I went, you know what? I don't want to go back. And at that point, I think that's when I decided I haven't got the balls to walk back in. That's how I felt. I haven't. Yeah. There's
a point, isn't there? I think something's just come to me, and I've never thought about it with my circumstances. Is that I think I was in the same place. I don't think I've got the balls to go back and even attempt to prove them wrong with something that I know is infinitely provable. But I just don't think I've got the balls. And I think, and this is very in the moment because I've never thought about this before, but I think that was because I was ashamed. And I was stuck in a pain loop of being ashamed that I didn't have the balls to fight it, and ashamed that I was ever in a position that somebody would say the things to me, about me, to my face that were said, because they were so appallingly inappropriate. And I sat there and took it.
Yeah, because what else are you going to do? You're down. You're bleeding, kicked to pieces on the ground. You got no fight. That's how I felt. No fight.
But then to sit and absorb shame that you create for yourself about the fact that you've been so violently treated with words and behaviours, but then you absorb it yourself, and that person or those people walk away with a wake of destruction behind them and probably don't ever give it a second thought. And yet it stays with you for life.
Sarah, not only do they not give it a second thought, they think they've done a good day's work.
Yeah.
Done a good day's work there. We had ineffectual, we had weak leadership, done a good day's work, right? We are the new brooms who are sweeping clean, out with the old, in with the new, let's march. Not only do they not give it a second thought, they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing for the good of the kids, the good of the school. I have spoken to people who've done it.
I had a relatively new chair of governors. There was a whole cocktail of things that went in, but and I remember her saying to me the first time we met, and she'd been appointed as chair, she said to me, I'm in HR, they call me the Terminator. That was her opening words in our first meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I do with that?
I had a friend.
Sorry,
Sarah.
I
had a friend who, when she became a head teacher, she is no longer a friend, said to me, oh, I've got the nickname Chopper, because of the amount of people who are, okay, When did that become okay? When did that become okay?
Yeah. I had, lots of leading up to me leaving, a lot of pressure from the local authority to do just that, what you've described. And it was against every instinct of my body, in my body. But they'd be coming back again and again. Let's go in, let's watch this lesson, let's do this, let's do that. And what do you think? Well, I think actually she did this, she did that. Yeah, no, but. No, you got to get rid. Yeah, it just so... I found myself in that position where I was being forced to peddle stuff that I just didn't believe in. It just was so against my own values and how people should be treated.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you're unhappy. You've listed all of the things that are adding pressure to you. You've talked about all the dark sides of what you were doing. I've listened to Sarah. She's working 11 hours a day, standard. She had no social life. Her school was her social life. All of the things that you talk about at great length that you're not happy with, and then they take it from you. It's not even your choice to walk. For want of a better expression, you've not even had the guts. It's like being in a toxic relationship and you get dumped. Where's your dignity? How can you heal from that? I was unhappy. I was treated badly. I'd lost all self-esteem. I'd lost sight of who I am. And guess what? They rejected me because I wasn't good enough for them. So is it any wonder that you have your Netflix and sofa period, that you go 4 months, you start talking settlement agreements? The stories aren't even unique. There's just slightly different regions of the country and accents that are telling these stories, because we've all pretty much got the same year and date of birth happening. We've all raved in the late 90s. We all started teaching during the halcyon days of Take That and Oasis. But here we are with the same stories. Yeah. But Paula, you have the settlement agreement. You do the settlement agreement. You come out the other side. Where do you start? Where do you start to piece back your identity, utilize your skill set? What do you do once you are out of that classroom?
Well, it took me about 2 years to really properly get well again. In that time, I did go back into the classroom. I went back as a teacher because we needed money. We needed to bring pennies in. So I went as a supply teacher and back into the classroom. And I've got to say, it was probably the best thing I ever did, because it reconnected me with my why. I was back on the chalk face. I was back there with the kids. I had none of that bollocks, excuse my French, to be forced. I used to think the further up the chain you get promoted, the more power you have, the more you can control it. Totally wrong. I had much more impact in individual kids' lives when I was in the classroom than I did when I was at the top of the ladder. So I did that for, it was only meant to be a couple of months, but then they asked me to stay on because they had a maternity leave. So I stayed for another year. And at that point, I was starting to miss leadership. I was starting to miss the bit that I loved about leadership, which is working with people and developing people. So I started to think about going back into leadership, but I knew, like you said earlier, Sarah, I was never, ever going to go and sit in that head spot again. I was never going to put myself back in that position of vulnerability again. So I became a deputy again. And I had 8 years as deputy and then head of school for a while we were amalgamating with another school. And it was great. It felt good. It felt good to be back. But it didn't take too long, because the same old stuff was still there. And it was just getting worse, squeezed budgets, SEN waiting lists, crazy things that we were having to ask teachers and support staff to do, and people just being stretched so thin. And I'm sitting in it thinking, you know what? You really can't fight City Hall. I've got this expression that you can't read the label from the inside of the tin. And that's what it was like. I was thinking, I can't do anything about it from in here. I've got to get out. If I've got the hope and hell of making a difference to the system, I can't do it from within. And then we fast forward to, so two things happened. My marriage eventually bought the farm because of the stress and the pressure, and you know, it was tough. So there I was, single mum of a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, or 6-year-old and an 11-year-old at the time. And then 6 months later, then my sister died. So that happened. My marriage ended and my sister dying happened within a 6-month period. And it was in my first year at this new job. I think I'd been there 3 weeks when we got the phone call about my sister. And what I realised was, okay, I fought my way back. I fought my way back to good health. But actually, nothing external has changed. But I was back in that, just push through, it'll get better, you'll be fine. You know, you've been, look what you've been through. You develop a resilience, don't you? A kind of, I can take on everything. And actually, Sarah, what you're saying about the shame, I think that was a big factor that kept me in the classroom or in school longer than I should have been, because I thought, I can't possibly go through that again. I can't possibly let everybody down again. I've got to do something about me. I've got to change.
And also, Paula, if I may, let's go back to that indoctrination that we had early doors with our Catholic faith. Gratitude. I am grateful to be here. I am grateful I've got the opportunity to go back in again. I am just so grateful that here I am with my begging bowl and they're going to let me back through the door. So you are not, and you think it's a massive win, because not only are you shedding the shame, but you're able to go back in, and you are just so grateful that they have pulled up a chair around the table that they excluded you from all those months ago. And that's what it's like in an abusive relationship, isn't it? Here I am again. I am wanted. Pick me, like me. Please convince me I am good enough.
Yeah. You go back full circle to that girl that wasn't picked time and time and time again.
Correct.
That's actually what was happening.
Please let me play on your team. Please say I am good enough. Please pick me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it keeps you doing stuff that,
of course it does,
really not, step away. But all of those things that you talk about in the very first Pit Pony podcast that you did, we talked about pension earlier. I'm a single mum. I've managed to keep a roof over the girls' heads by spending every last penny I've got to buy him out of the house, even though I didn't need to do that until the kids were 18. But I needed that sense of security. So then I've got this huge mortgage to pay. My heart's broken in this profession. I don't love it anymore. I've fallen out of love. But I'm stuck in this abusive relationship. I can't get out. I haven't got the money to get out. What about my pension? All of those things that you talk about, these are the thoughts, the self-limiting beliefs that we have that come back to the one fundamental self-limiting belief, which is I'm not good enough.
Correct.
So you go on, you carry on, hoping it's going to get better. And then there's this whole stuff about, law of attraction. Oh, I just have to think my way into, and it'll miraculously be wonderful. Yeah. That doesn't work either. So I limped along. And my health was suffering. My relationship with my kids was suffering, because what I was doing was self-medicating with food and alcohol to get me through. You know, Friday night takeaway, because I earn it, I deserve it. I don't have to cook tonight, getting a takeaway. I deserve it. I used to have this phrase, I'm sure you've heard it before, an open bottle's an empty bottle in my house. You didn't have a glass of wine, you had the bottle of wine. And then it became two. And then it became, I feel crap, so I'm going to eat something. Yeah. When do you have time to exercise? So you can see the downward spiral in your health. You're not happy, so your relationships are crap. You don't have any energy to go out with your mates at the weekend. And I got to the point where I was like, I realised I was back there again. And I was like, have you learned nothing, child? Have you learned nothing? Here I am. Not, you know, I hadn't got a tree picked out at this point. But what I did do every night was go to bed thinking, if I don't wake up tomorrow, that's not a bad thing. Because I was trapped, Sarah. I didn't know. I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know how to get what I did want. I actually didn't know what I did want. I just knew what I didn't want this. And I went through all of those. I can't afford to retrain. Nobody's going to employ me. I remember actually at one point looking around the staff room thinking, when did I get to not be the baby on the staff anymore? What happened? Where did those years go? I'm looking around at these young kids thinking I was that young kid just yesterday.
And I don't know about you, because you've just articulated something really beautiful, this pain loop of self-soothing that we get into that very quickly becomes self-sabotage. You could add cigarettes to that for me, by the way. You just missed the triple threat of food, alcohol and cigarettes. And then I think over time we added a fourth strand to the self-soothing, self-sabotaging, which is doom scrolling on social media, looking at how great everybody else's bloody life is while we're sat on the settee going, it's a Thursday night, I can't go into that second bottle. And you compliment yourself because you've only had one bottle. Okay. And you learn to function with that tight head hangover that you have, because that is the norm of how you get up. It impacts your hydration levels, your bowels, your appetite, your need for salt and carbohydrates first thing in the morning. You have sugar spikes. So the whole thing is just inwardly folding in on itself. And when you feel like shit, you look like shit, you eat shit. Mike Roberts is going to be bleeping like mad here, but the whole thing is happening over and over again. That's it. I'm going to go to Slimming World, or I'm going to start this diet, or I'm going to do the Cambridge 1-to-1 diet. And it's always tomorrow, and it never happens, and it never comes. And then the guilt is then attached to how you feel, because you cannot put a spanner in and break this cycle of what's happening. But it's all right, because if you can get through to the summer holidays, or you can get through to Easter, we're all right.
Yeah, we can breathe.
It is this constant, we can breathe, but we've been taught that as kids. We have been taught that by our parents, that it's okay to put things on hold until the 2 weeks away in Torquay, until Christmas, until we retire. So to a certain extent, this feels familiar to us, living in this awful, painful situation, because we're always working towards the end game. But eventually they say the body keeps score.
Yeah.
And we can only get away with it for so long. And we find ourselves yet again, something has to give. And it does. Yeah. So in the end, with you, Paula, I am aware, for those who might be watching this, my Wi-Fi is playing up a little bit at the minute because it's raining in Warrington. But I hope you're still with me on my rant about cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, and doom scrolling. There's no drugs. We were the wrong era for drugs, thank God. Thank God, because I'll tell you why. If Zamo had not frightened me to death in Grange Hill, Christ, I'd have been down that rabbit hole, no messing.
Just say no.
No.
Just say no. Just say no.
God, I never went there. So with that in mind, what snapped for you, Paula? What was the snapping point?
My back snapped, literally. Be careful what you wish for. I remember thinking, do you know what? And it's this whole thing about pause. I just need a pause. I need to get headspace. And I want to just, I found myself thinking, just a little car accident. Just something that might put me in hospital. Not serious, for a couple of weeks. So I can just stop. And I don't have to feel shame that I'm failing. This is something that's happened to me, therefore I have to stop, not I have chosen to stop. And literally, be careful what you wish for. A week after that thought entered my head, I fell over and I broke my back. Landed on a concrete step. And that whole thing about pushing through, I walked around for 24 hours with a broken back thinking, oh, I'll be all right. I've just got bruising. And eventually ended up in A&E and they confirmed, yeah, no, you've broken your back. And you said earlier about the body keeping the score. I'd read, I've always been into personal development and I love stuff that's woo-woo, but not too woo-woo. I like the science behind the woo. And I'd read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Joe Dispenza book. And he talked about his story about visualizing and healing himself when he was in a massive car crash when he was in his 20s. And I thought, I wonder if this works. So I trusted my body. I got out of my own way. And I used to just allow, and it sounds funny, but I'm in pain. I can't do anything. I surrender to that. I'm not going to try and fight it. I'm allowing that. And at the same time, I'm visualizing white fibers doing this. I'm just picturing it 4 or 5 times a day. I was going back having MRI scan after MRI scan, and they're saying to me, we're seeing the rate of healing that we would expect after a year in 2 months. And I'm thinking, now, is that coincidence or is there something in this? Well, life of pi, yeah? Which story do you want to tell yourself? Tell yourself the better story. I liked telling myself the story that I'm doing this. I'm healing myself. So that's the story I tell myself. So there I was, anyway, lying flat on my back, not able to move, not able to do very much at all, had the headspace that I needed. And also, and I'm a firm believer in there is no such thing as a coincidence. You can trace everything back. I had a phone call from an ex-colleague. We shared an office for a while. We were deputies together. And I used to rattle on about Abraham Hicks and Joe Dispenza and all that. And he used to listen with interest. And he heard that I broke my back and he called me up and he said, oh, I'm doing this course at the moment, right up your alley. He said, you'd love it. And it's $350. I said, I'll stop you there, Dave. I haven't got $350. And he called me back about an hour later and he went, look, I get a discount. I'll give that to you. So it only cost you $200. Now can you afford it? And I kind of went, this is knocking at the door. This is something that keeps coming back. Pay attention. Pay attention. Long story short, I signed up. Within a week, I'd gone from I can't afford $350 to I can't not afford the full Monty, 10 grand it cost me. And I did this course. And it changed my, Sharon, you know, it changed my life because it enabled me to move away from all of that. Let's try this diet. Let's try that diet. Let's do over and over again. Willpower is never enough. Whatever it is that you it'll get you off the blocks, but it won't sustain transformational change. That's what this course did for me. I learned how to bust all my limiting beliefs. And it was that enabled me then, within 4 months of finishing that course. I'd wanted out for 8 years. Nothing had changed in my circumstances, but I wrote my letter of resignation and handed it over. And it is categorically the best thing I've ever done. This time, I left on my terms. This time, I walked away because I chose me. And it was life-changing. Still had the huge mortgage to pay. I bust the pension thing. In fact, I took early retirement to facilitate that, because that's in the future. That pension can sit there, and I can do another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in this job, and somebody else is going to get it because I won't be getting it because I'll be in the ground. So yeah, forget that. That meant nothing, and I didn't tell anybody. One person said to me, "Oh no, don't do that. Well, you've got to protect your pension." I thought, I'm not listening, actually. And this is another thing. People have this phrase, I love it, opinions are like arseholes, everybody's got one. Yeah. And people are well-meaning. They want the best for you. Well, some people are. Most people that you're close to are well-meaning. But all it is an opinion. Unless they've walked in your shoes, then they're not qualified. It's not fact, it's just opinion. And getting strong enough to not listen to the opinions of others, to not listen to what other people are saying. Listen to what you're saying. Listen to what your inner self is telling you. And it's fear that keeps us trapped.
And it goes to something you said. You knew what I did. I knew what I didn't want. I just didn't know what all the. And I think when people are strong, Sharon and I have regular conversation. You know, we have about 25 hours a week on the telephone where we talk about all this sort of stuff. But when you are mentally fit, when you are strong, when you've taken that choice to go, no, I'm going to do what's right for me. Sharon has made me reframe something this week where I've described myself as selfish, and she has said, no, you were being self-full. It was right to do that for you. I think then you can go, okay, I know what I don't want, and I'm not having it anymore. I don't know what I do want. I don't know how to get what I do want, but I can make that active decision in this moment now to not have the things that I don't want. And that's a really powerful position to be in, but it's terrifying if you're not mentally fit. You can't take that decision if you are not mentally fit to do it.
And can I tell you what has made the difference? And it isn't the course. It isn't that. It is, obviously. But all the way through, you have stood on the sidelines and waited to be picked. You picked yourself. You chose you. You said, I don't need any external validation to make me feel okay. I am choosing myself. Mm-hmm. And the minute you've done that, and the minute you do that, nobody can have any power over you, because it is up to you. It was the greatest act of self-love and selflessness that you did by retraining as the transformational coach that you are. And I know you do great work. The clue is in the title. You transformed yourself, you transform others. And I urge people to contact Paula using the links below and see the work that she does. And she can talk to you about the course that she did. Please reach out to her with our blessing. And I think it leads us nicely in, because it does link to that special moment in your life, Paula. It links to your sliding doors moment. And I cannot wait to hear it. Tell us about your sliding doors.
So my sliding doors came about a year after I'd written my letter of resignation, and maybe about 4 months after I'd actually left. And I'm attending a conference in Tenerife that I'd been to the year before, and it was so inspirational that I wanted to take my daughter to it. So I bought us both tickets to go the following year, because that was the point I was at. I had been told growing up that you get a job, you work for somebody, that's it. And I had been subconsciously doing the same to my kids. When I left, I then realised there's a whole bloody world out there, kid. You don't have to just follow the vanilla path. Go to university, graduate, get a job. There's a new future is always available. You can do anything you want to do. It took me 55 years to realise that. I didn't want it to take her 55 years. So I took her to this conference. Millionaire Business School, it's called, in Tenerife. There we are in this glorious hotel. And it was my first autumn out of school. And I'm sitting there in the pool, this infinity pool, azure blue sky, gorgeous weather, with my daughter, thinking, I'll be doing assembly roundabout now. I went, yeah, I've made the right choice. And we went into the first part of the conference. And I didn't know this was happening, but I got called up onto stage. And in front of 500 people, I was recognised and given the award of Most Transformed. And my daughter was there to see it. We talk about legacy. That's the legacy you want to leave your kids. She possibly could have been visiting my grave, but she wasn't. She was watching her mum on stage, being celebrated, being seen, being appreciated. And all because I chose me.
Yes. Yes, you did. And it's a pleasure to have you as a friend. It really is. And you've joined us at the National Tutors Conference. You have always been one of the biggest advocates of the pit pony. It's one of the first things you did. You came to our conference, you got in the mixer with our gang and our tribe. And Paula, on behalf of our listeners, myself and Sarah, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving up your time today. I want to thank you for sharing your story in some of your darkest moments, but some of your brightest moments. And you will always have a place in our hearts. We are privileged to consider you our friend. Thank you, Paula Smith.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sarah.